Hello everyone, Waxo here. Today we're going to be talking about Insurgency Sandstorm, the hardcore first-person shooter from developer New World. Though this title is almost 3 years old at this point, I figured with the wave of multiplayer FPS coming soon, and the recent release of the console version, that I should probably get some sort of practice in reviewing for the genre before those AAA heavy hitters rolled in. And what better way than my second most played game since building my PC earlier this year. So with that all cleared up, let's talk Insurgency. Insurgency Sandstorm is a team-based FPS set in a fictional Middle Eastern country. Players will either play as the military-based security or the terrorist insurgency, oftentimes switching sides per match. The different sides you play on, depending on the game mode, also affects what weapons will be available to you, as well as the fire support for your team, but more on those later. When it comes to exactly what you'll be doing in Sandstorm, there's quite a few options on hand. In the co-op section, you have Checkpoint, which has your team participating in various objectives until the final one is complete. Outpost, which has you defending an objective against multiple waves of increasingly difficult enemies in order to gain supply points to equip better weapons and attachments between rounds. Then there's Survival, which can be best described as running suicides with guns. You initially start with nothing but a sidearm and are tasked with capturing an objective. Once you do so, multiple boxes placed on the marker unlock, offering you a randomly customized weapon. Once you collect it, you're then off to the next objective, repeating the process until extracting via helicopter, but only after defending it for a few minutes. And while I'd be lying if I said the co-op modes aren't fun, especially Survival, they feel like more of a diversion rather than the main reason to boot up this title. For those seeking a more competitive experience, Versus will have you covered, as its 4 modes can pit up to 32 players against each other. These modes include Push, an attack-defense fair where the attacking force, who have a limited amount of wave respawns, must successfully uproot the defensive team through multiple points until a final objective, gaining new respawn waves as they do so. Firefight, a domination type mode. Only if you die, you're dead until either your teammates capture one of the 3 flags, or they are all wiped out, and switches sides after a few rounds. Frontline, where both teams are fighting for control over the enemy objective while defending their own. If you manage to successfully control the enemy's point, the frontline moves forward. The recently captured point is now the objective you must protect, and you continue pushing the enemy further and further until you reach their final objective. The enemy team, however, can actually take control back, pushing the line to where it was, or even push the front line in their favor. Also, like Push, both sides have a limited amount of spawn waves they get, gaining more for capturing objectives. And lastly, there's Domination, which is a more simplified version of Firefight, where both teams are fighting for 3 flags with unlimited respawns, and the ability to use whatever weapon regardless of what side they're on. And of the modes, I can say that Push is by far my favorite, as it can offer some really intense moments as it gets down to the wire. Whether it's braving enemy fire support with a few friendlies because you guys are the last ones alive, or making a risky play to take out an enemy technical or incoming helicopter. Following Push though, I'll have to say that Frontline is my next favorite, followed by Firefight, which unfortunately struggles with finding a consistent player base. The only mode I really don't like is Domination, as there tends to be far less teamwork than any other mode, which is pretty integral to this game's experience. Though people may not always talk over comms, they still move together and use the in-game present lines. In Domination though, there's a severe lack of even that. The spawns are pretty bad too. Sandstorm is by far one of the most difficult FPS I've played. The core experience is designed around some pretty hardcore principles for the genre, starting with its HUD, or better put, the near lack thereof. The only thing that is in your HUD is the objective and your teammates. That's all. The fire mode you see on my screen is actually added via the options. Occasionally, you'll see a compass appear whenever someone uses the chat presence to alert where an enemy is, and ammo can be checked by holding the reload button. Gunplay is also a bit different than most FPS. The first thing you'll notice is that when you look around, your weapon moves a tad slower in the same direction. This means that whenever you happen to need to fire from the hip, your bullets go where your gun is pointed, not necessarily where you're looking. Then there's staged reloads. Staged reloads mean that when you're reloading and for some reason you're interrupted and need to switch to, say, your sidearm, when you return to your main weapon, your ammo indicator will flash red, showing that your weapon isn't properly loaded, and will continue the reloading animation. A nice little detail included is that if you unload a magazine that wasn't entirely empty, you'll still have a round in your chamber that you can actually discharge. Then there's speed reloads. When you reload normally, you'll see that it takes some time to actually do so, but completing one preserves whatever ammo was left in the magazine for later on. When you speed reload, however, you immediately eject the previous magazine out, replacing it quickly with another. In doing so though, you lose whatever remaining ammo there was. It's a mechanic that gives you a bit of tactical flexibility, dependent on whatever situation you find yourself in. Continuing on with gunplay, there's also bullet penetration, which varies depending on what weapon you're using. An MP5 can easily fire through thin metal, but gets stopped by a brick wall, while a 50 caliber on the back of a technical makes cover absolutely obsolete. Same thing goes with explosives like grenades and RPGs, with the explosive force of the latter being able to kill someone on the other side of where it detonates. And it should be noted that if you do get into a gunfight, death comes easily, as it normally takes only 1 to 2 shots for you or your enemy to go down, so be prepared to die. A lot. When customizing your kit, the first thing you'll notice is that per class you have quite a selection of weapons and equipment at your disposal, and rather than making you play hours and hours of the game to unlock each weapon, attachment, and such, every weapon is available from the get-go. Instead, within a match you get a budget of supply points to allocate towards what you bring. Some weapons will be more expensive than others, with the same principle applying to attachments and equipment. It makes you think what would be most beneficial to you per situation, having you decide if you should trade equipment for a weapon with lots of attachments or a cheaper weapon with more grenades and ammo. The weapons available to you are based on what class you pick at any point during a round in most modes. Classes range from Rifleman, which is just a standard soldier with no specific role, Advisor, who acts sort of like a rifleman but uses more difficult weaponry, Breacher, who specialize in close quarter combat with weapons like the MP5, MP7, and shotguns, Gunner, who are equipped with light machine guns for suppressing fire and holding down objectives, Demolitions, the explosive experts, with access to grenades and rocket launchers, Marksmen, who get access to the long-range rifles, and Observers and Commanders. These are 2 separate classes, but you can't have one without the other. Though both have access to the same standard rifles, the Commander is the only class with access to fire support, allowing them to call in everything from a smoke barrage to conceal advancing teammates to an attack helicopter that patrols an area briefly. In order to do so, however, an Observer must be close to the Commander, indicated by a meter in the bottom left corner, so that when a Commander picks a location for the fire support, the Observer makes the actual call to HQ. Observers can't call fire support in without a commander, and commanders won't get the fire support they need without an observer. Another thing I want to bring attention to is the sound design of Insurgency, because though every other attention to detail I mentioned adds to the immersiveness, the sound design is what takes it to a whole other level. The explosiveness of artillery fire landing, ringing your ears with shell after shell, the noticeable change in gunfire in an open area as opposed to indoors, the disturbing wails of dying enemies and teammates, all mixed together for a brutal and haunting experience. To give an example, here's the opening moments of a match I got for this review.
Let me try to move. Man down!
Smoke out! Give it a sec!
How did you get sniped?
Hey,
I'm getting this car out of here.
With all that out the way, you might wonder, how does it all come together? Is Insurgency Sandstorm, and all its mechanics and attention to detail, worth the time of anyone looking to get into the hardcore FPS subgenre? As someone who's admittedly no pro when it comes to it, I do highly recommend this be your gateway. The learning curve is steep, even in spite of the tutorial and in-game guides, but it's one that, if you can stick out, will prove to be a highly enjoyable and deeply immersive experience. My only real gripes comes with the Domination game mode, and that some maps do sort of favor one side over the other. An example of this would be the map Hillside, where the security attackers literally have an uphill battle against the defenders. And though it's not impossible, my playtime has seen attackers lose far more frequently than not. Outside of that though, Insurgency Sandstorm is an easy recommendation for anyone who's been eyeing this game as of recent. This has been Waxo, and until next time, take it easy.